Welcome to Home Care Hot Seats with Kelly and Nicole, the exclusive podcast for home care owners by home care owners. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Nicole, two home care owners who live and breathe the challenges and triumphs of the industry every day. Join us as we dive into the latest happenings, innovative strategies, and the raw truth of balancing business with everyday life.
Whether you're a seasoned owner, a new entrepreneur, or just curious about the world of home care, you're in the right place. Did you see this post in the home care ops community? I'm looking for it right now. I'm like scrolling.
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Because it got very heated.
Yes, I do know which one you're talking about. Should a home care owner have worked in the industry before opening an agency or something to that effect?
Yes.
Yes.
Something to that effect. I'm going back and I'm scrolling. You can see how prepared we are for these.
Right. Yeah. I did see that. I was actually trying to
Yes.
figure out what I was going to make for dinner when I saw that post, and I was standing in my kitchen and I saw the initial post, and I was just standing there with the refrigerator doors open, and I was just scrolling through and scrolling through and scrolling through. I was like, ooh.
I know.
I was like, I'm not
Some people got very,
sure.
like, one side or the other. Like, you could tell that
Yeah,
there were some, like, hurt feelings.
for sure.
And I don't think that's not the point of the post, obviously, but it brings up a really interesting topic,
It
because,
does. Yeah.
um one of the things that you and I have talked about so often, I'm like still scrolling because I can't find this post now that it's one that I just saw. Um, but I think one of the most interesting things that we have talked about is how this industry is it's all over the place.
Hmm.
There's not it because it's not highly regulated, and we call ourselves 20 different names.
Yep.
Are we personal care attendants, caregivers, home health aides, um you name it. So, and then you've got one state that is highly regulated down to my state that it's like the wild wild west.
Hmm.
So there's this feeling of being not very structured.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's where some of this comes from. But I'm super interested because you have a healthcare background.
Hmm.
So you're a nurse by education, right?
Hmm. So I've actually gone back and forth on this because I have said both things. I have said at one point in time, you absolutely need to have a healthcare background to work in this industry. And at other times, I've said business is business is business. It doesn't matter what it is. And after I saw that question, it made me think about why have I been on both sides of this issue? And one of the things I think it really comes down to is your state, because there's no universal regulations on what a home care agency is, does, or provides. It makes it different from state to state. I think out of all of the unregulated states, you're probably in what we call the wild, wild west. I mean,
Yes, the most
you guys are
unregulated.
wild with some of the things that happen in your state, but I'm also in a regulated state, and there is some, like, we're pretty regulated through our contracts. But if you have a
Right.
private pay industry or private pay only agency, you can literally do whatever you want. There's really nothing that no parameters you really have to follow. But then there's other states that are so extremely regulated. So I think when you're getting into those states that have really high regulations and they're monitored very closely by the state, by whatever entities are overseeing that industry, I think there does need to be some healthcare background. I think there needs to be some education of how to take care of people, how to provide a service that is within those parameters, because those parameters are set by healthcare professionals. But I also think that in states where there's not heavy regulations, Michigan, Alabama, I think somebody that doesn't have a healthcare background can come in and build a successful business, and I know that to be true because you and I have both done that. Um,
Right.
and you without a healthcare background per se. So I think that it really goes into what your state requires. And that I think whether you yourself have a healthcare background or you have somebody that you're pulling that background or that healthcare information from, um, it really just is going to depend on what your state requires.
Yeah, so I found the post. I'm gonna
Okay.
pull it up and share. But if you're not watching, if you're just listening, so the post is agree or disagree. Every home care owner needs to have worked in the industry before owning an agency. Okay. So have mixed feelings about this,
Mm-hmm.
as you, right? So, one thing that I struggle with in the regulated states is that what we do is considered non medical, right? Even
Yep.
in a regulated state, it is a non medical service. So, when you are being regulated by a medical entity,
Mm-hmm.
that seems counterintuitive,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. Yep.
And I get that they don't know where to put us, right? But at the same time, so much of what we do is not medical. It is healthcare, two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I think that confuses people. I think that confuses owners
Oh, for
because
sure.
they believe that there's this little bitty gap, and that's where we are. There was another recent post that said something about like, can the aide take the client out um on a walk or something like that?
Mhm.
And tons of people came back and said, what does the care plan say? What does the care plan say? What does the care plan say? As if the care plan was written by a nurse.
Right.
And in a lot of states, the care plan is.
Mhm.
But taking a client on a walk is not a medical regulated. So I struggle there because you're you're mixing the water a little bit, and that's I think where we have so much confusion. We work in conjunction with that medical side. And so in that instance, like, can you take sure you can take the client on the walk. Are they medically released to do that? Like, did they just have surgery? Did they, I mean, but if we're just talking about like,
It's a nice day outside. Let's take a
Susie
walk.
Smith,
Yeah.
yeah, like, from a overall like quality of life perspective, which is what I think we can all agree that what we're trying to do,
Mhm.
that absolutely fits into our parameters. So some of it for me, like kind of muddies the water there. I think what's interesting about this question is you could take home care completely out of it. Should you have worked in an industry before you own or operate a business in that industry? So this goes to I mean, you don't have to,
No, not at all.
like you can be a hands off, owner. There's lots of investors that own multiple companies. Look at like Undercover Boss,
Mhm.
the, the whole show that they've never worked, they don't know what goes on. I think that if you want to understand what your people go through and you want to understand the processes and how everything fits together, then you should work in the industry. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a background in like caregiving. It could mean that like at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, before you can be in management, you have to work the line, you have to work the, cash register, you do all these so you understand how it all comes together. For me, that's what I feel like. You need to understand how it all comes together. You need to have done scheduling. You cannot understand a scheduler's life and the, you know, the headache of scheduling until you have scheduled. You need to take call because if you have never taken call on a holiday, then you don't get it,
Mhm.
right? Um, if you've never wiped a butt, if you've never dealt with a aggressive client, then you don't you don't know. You can't like empathize the same way. Like we can feel bad for folks and understand that, what they're going through is tough, but if you've never experienced that, perspective is everything.
And I think that there are also, on kind of the flip side of that, I think there's also some areas where working in this industry and then becoming a business owner is crippling, and um, it can be a downfall for agency owners if you have spent a long time. Let's say you've been a CNA or you've been a nurse for years, you've been in the healthcare industry, and you decide I'm gonna open a home care agency because I can do it better. I want to provide a better service. What we end up doing, and I think anybody that's come into this industry because they are a caregiver and they want to provide a quality service, we end up getting stuck in making decisions as a caregiver. And that's a
Mm.
lot of what we see in like the home care ops nation. And when we're talking to action leaders, is that mind shift change that has to happen because you can't operate like a caregiver in this industry. So we have all this experience and we know how services should run from firsthand experience, but it actually cripples the decisions that we should be making as a business owner because, and you guys have probably or will hear me say this a million times, the decisions we make as a caregiver are generally different than the decisions we make as a business owner. So if we're
Yeah.
using experience in this industry, sometimes that experience, I think, can lead us into the wrong direction when we're making decisions. When we really, if we were coming in with just a business background, we could objectively look at what is this decision we need to make. Is it for the betterment of the business or is it to help a singular person? And a lot of times we get caught up in helping that singular person and not thinking of things on a larger scale, on a business scale. So I think there's a lot of argument to be made for both sides of this. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I think everybody pulls from what their experience is, and
Yeah.
it's about being vulnerable to see the other side. I think if you come in with no experience, being vulnerable to see and hear the things that people that do have experience are hearing, and then vice versa.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. There's not a right answer here. Like, I mean, we could survey 100 owners and they would all have very different answers, and a lot of it's gonna come from their own personal, perspective and
Hmm.
background, and, I think that what we can all agree on is that being open to learning constantly, being open to, understanding more about the industry, understanding more about aging, understanding more about what our caregivers are going through, um, that's what is gonna make it more than if you were a caregiver for 10 years before you started a business, or if were a stay-at-home mom,
Yep,
and
absolutely.
never were a caregiver. So, I think it's a really interesting, it was interesting to me. So it has 81 comments,
Hmm.
um, and it was posted on December 23rd. So, it's not that old, but you can definitely tell. I'm gonna pull it up and I can read a couple.
People were
Um, but
serious
here's
about their responses. They
They
were.
were. I do. So here's one response that I agree with this, and the comment says completely agree. If you don't know what it means to do the job or know the healthcare industry, I strongly feel you don't serve your client to the level that you could as an owner. You then are relying completely on others' expertise and hoping that they know what they're doing. Your lack of industry experience will inevitably come through in your decision making. If you're supposed to be assessing functional needs on medical complex clients and with little to no idea of what you're actually looking at or how to best guide them on their healthcare journey, I don't know if you're really serving them as they deserve.
Hmm.
I I don't know if it has as much to do with the medical complexity side of it. I do think it has to do with, are we serving our client to the best of our ability?
Hmm.
Because if we don't understand the industry, if we don't understand aging, if we don't understand, how we fit into the whole puzzle, then can we be that resource that we want to be?
Right.
I think that is where this comment kind of comes into play. And you know how passionate I feel about that because I fully believe that as home care owners, we do not own our part of this puzzle,
Hmm.
and we should. We
Yes.
know way more than we give ourselves credit for. And for what we don't know and understand, we need to get our hands around it so that we can be that resource.
Yeah, and I think you guys will learn as you listen to more of our podcast, as you're binging and listening to all of these episodes. So what I like to play devil's advocate. I think that for that person, that is absolutely how that person feels, and it's valid, and it makes 100% sense. What I would challenge that person to do is consider, when you're a $5 million agency or a $10 million agency, you should not be the person leading and making all those decisions. So you are at some point going to need to start relying on other experts in their field. You're going to need to have somebody who is training. You're going to need somebody who's doing your intakes, who's providing the care. It's not always going to be you. So where the business starts, where it might be you wearing all of the hats as you grow, to grow efficiently and effectively, and where you're not burning yourself out, you can't be the person doing all of those things that we start in the beginning as an independent agency owner or with a partner. So while it might make sense on a smaller scale to have that experience to pull from, at some point, you've got to let those reins go. You've got to give that hat to somebody else. And it's going to be somebody else that may not necessarily have the same experience as you do in home care. So, where somebody might not be a nurse, you're going to pull a nurse in for training or for intakes and for all of those things. So, it really doesn't always come back to your personal experience on what you're expecting. You're setting the expectation, and you're putting people in that that arena to meet your expectation or the expectation of the expert in the field, in that or that area that they're working within. So I think for individuals or smaller agencies, yes, I think that that makes sense. Bigger scale, it can't be just one person. So you do at some
Yeah.
point have to let your expectations go a little bit and start utilizing other people that have experience or can execute your goal.
Yeah. I think that, some of this comes back to conversations that we've had before on, should there be, some sort of overarching regulation is such a word that we need like a synonym.
I need a better
Some
word.
sort of like governing body or like credentialing, accreditation, something for home care as a whole,
Hmm.
so that we can compare apples to apples, and we can all have best practices. And I think that's where that argument kind of comes up again. When we talk about regulation, we tend to talk about government,
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
mean that's who's regulating, and I don't know that that's where it needs to be. I think that from a home care industry perspective, we as an industry should come together and decide, this is the standard of care.
Hmm.
These are these are the best practices. This is what it should look like. Um, and obviously we're not telling people what to do, but so that we can have some sort of an overarching governing body and, you know, lay out the best practices.
Well, and I think too, the other thing is, on the flip side of that is, like you said, it's been made very clear that home care is non-medical. So why? Why do we need an overarching? regulator. We don't necessarily have that in other industries. If I were to buy the laundromat next door to me, it's a business. It's a business at the end of the day. There's other businesses that deal with people. And if we look at what home care is, bathing, grooming, dressing, how significantly do we really need to regulate that? And in those states that have high regulations, that it requires somebody with a medical background to be the admissions director or to do the intakes, for what? To provide a not, you require a medical personnel to set non-medical standards? Like, that seems counterintuitive to me.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things, like, we're going to go back and forth on a ton,
Yeah.
but I struggle, like, with what we do. We can't bill insurance for the most part. I mean, we're not
Right.
billing private secondary insurance. If we're getting into Medicare and stuff, we're looking at more home health. We're looking at people that are licensed medical professionals. Home
Right.
care doesn't necessarily require any licensure. So why, like, my contracts that I have with the state, they require that I have nursing for skill set A, B, and C, or this part of the business. And I have challenged my contract providers and asked them, like, you have made it very clear. I only need a business license to have this business in the state of Michigan. I need to have insurance and a business license. So why, if all you're approving is dressing, grooming, bathing, meal prep, why do I need a nurse to do that? That is
Right.
that is something we are doing every day. You're not requiring me to have CNAs, but you're requiring me to have a nurse for what?
Right.
So
I mean,
that's
it's
my
interesting.
struggle.
I mean, I agree. I agree. I recently I have started even I mean, I hate to say this, but even saying, well, we're really not home care. That's really
Hmm.
not what we do.
Yep,
Because,
same.
I mean, if we're gonna put ourselves in the home care bucket, then um I feel like it's a crapshoot.
Yes. It changes from agency to agency. This agency won't do vitals. This agency will do vitals. This agency won't do blood sugars. This one will. Uh, You could literally call the agency 20 miles down the road and they might do a whole slot of things that we don't do. There's no
Yeah.
common practice, which again, I get the regulation piece for, but it's like that in any business. Some laundromats will do your laundry for you, some will not. We literally have a laundromat next door. That's why I keep referencing that. But
I was gonna say, is that our next business opportunity? Are we opening a
maybe,
laundromat?
I have always said I want to have a
That's funny.
laundromat or a car wash. It just seems like really easy residual income. I say easy because I wouldn't be the one fixing things. That would most definitely be my husband's job. But those are two businesses that have always been on my radar. I want to own.
That's funny. I think a car wash, like, I'd be all about a car wash. And so my guess is, like, there are environmental impacts to those kind of businesses, and so they are regulated probably on that end of it.
Hmm.
Um, I'm talking about a business that I have no idea
Same.
about.
Seems real
But
easy.
yeah, it does, right? And hopefully no one who owns a car wash or a laundromat will be listening and be
They're going
like,
to come
"Let
for
me
us.
tell you." Yeah,
Right?
well, it won't be the last time that somebody tries to come for us, you
No,
know?
we're actually going to have a segment of "Don't come for me," but and then
Yes.
our kind of off the wall opinion on different things. So something to look forward to. Because
Yeah.
and to kind of start a little intro on where that came from, we were at a conference together, Kelly and I, and we were talking about, I don't e, Kim Walsh Phillips was there, and she was gave a great presentation, and um, I don't even remember what the question was, something about what is
I
home care,
remember.
or what makes your home care different, or what's an opinion that you have that people don't agree with. And there
Yeah,
was
maybe that
these,
was it.
I think that was it, there was like these cubes we were throwing around that were microphones, and I got it, and I was like, okay, don't come for me, but here's my opinion, and I'm not going to tell you guys what it was because that'll be its own whole segment. But
You should have
Immediately.
seen the room. It was like,
You When I said it, like, you could feel, like, the air got sucked out of the room, and people that weren't
like pearls were
looking,
clutched.
I mean, daggers shot through me. I could metaphorically feel it, and I was like, "Ho, ho, ho. Well, okay,
Yeah.
so made some people mad with that one." So, can't wait to share that with you guys.
And that I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the podcast, right? I mean, we wanna talk about the things that, affect us as owners and
Mhm,
affect the industry as a whole, things that we don't tend to talk about, but are important to talk about. For those really juicy episodes like our home care horror stories and the don't come for me's and, those are subscriber only. So you have to subscribe to the home care hot seats news blast in order to get those because obviously um there's some a little more racy thing. Racy is probably not the right word,
racy and
but
home care. Ugh.
home care, yeah, um so those will only drop for people who are subscribed. So if you are not currently subscribed for our email blast, then go ahead and pick up that link in the show notes below. um but yeah, I mean, we've got tons of good stuff coming your way this season. I think that this is one example of some places where we saw people get passionate, and I like that. I like to see that people are
Mhm,
passionate about what they do, that they, take a side. I think that very often, you don't want to be polarizing to a point where you can't see other people's views and opinions. But so often in home care, I feel like we are just sitting in our corners, not, giving our opinions and not being part of the conversation. And, I want to challenge you to get in there, be part of that conversation. You know more than you think you do. I
mhm,
mean, you understand just because you're not medical doesn't mean you don't add value to the healthcare industry, especially with the aging industry.
mhm. Well, and I would
And
challenge that too
we'll
and say that we actually need more people in the home care industry that aren't experienced in home care personally. I think we need more business. There is a lot of home care that is we for all of the right reasons we started these agencies because we wanted to do it differently and we wanted to do it better. But
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
missing is the business piece. Nobody teaches you how to run a
Yeah.
business. So, getting people in the home care industry that have that business experience, that have built and run successful businesses outside of home care, I think we have a lot to learn from them. And how
Well, it
we
just
talk
opens
about,
up that new view.
yeah, and we talk about not having a seat at the table. So, I feel like there's this big table and it's got all of the typical healthcare people, doctors, nurses, skilled nursing facilities, home healthcare agencies, and then there's a chair for home care owners in the back of the corner of the room.
Yeah, in the
Like,
corner.
yeah, we barely can hear the conversation that's going on. We don't have a water. We're just taking notes, hoping
We're
at
not
some
yeah,
point,
we're like,
yeah,
"Are they gonna
hoping
ask us
at
a
some point
question?"
they're going to bring us to the table and let us answer a question or two. And I feel like the people that have a business background, they're still in the waiting room. So
Yeah.
I want those people that have that business background. I want those people. I want to hear from those people. I want to hear like why this would never work in a different type of business. Why is this specific only to home care? Because I think there's a lot of things that we are behind the times on when it comes to home
100%.
care. I think we're operating in a couple different decades ago when it comes to home care. I mean, there's not many other businesses that are still run on paper and pencil. And I know that there are agencies that are still doing paper care notes that have no scheduling software. I, they're having
Well,
their
yeah, because
staff
we see
come
those
in and pick
questions
up.
all the time.
Yep. They have to come in on Friday and pick up their paper schedule for the next week. Like, those are the things that we need business people. We need to tell us, like, how are you efficiently and effectively doing this in other industries? Because we're not the only industry that goes into people's homes,
No,
but we're probably one of the
no.
last ones that are still charting it all on paper.
But here's the other part of it. If we want to be taken seriously, then we have to make serious moves. And
Yes.
that I think that is the other if we want to be taken seriously as a business entity, as home care itself, if we want to be part of healthcare, then we need to make those big business moves. We are
Hmm.
not a sitting service,
Right.
you know. So and because we are in this home care bucket, we're only as good as our worst your worst home care agency down the street
Absolutely.
because I mean we're all being compared to each other. So if you've got, mama's angels down the road taking care notes on a piece of paper and, not filling shifts and not having an idea when somebody's there and when they're not and then that is the community's idea of home care.
Hmm.
And that has to change. That has to change. So and we have to start talking about that. We have to start raising the bar. And we need to be okay to be wrong at times. Like I don't know when it became such a thing that like we can't admit that we're wrong, we can't be humble, we can't, change our thinking and we're going to talk about things on this podcast and get real passionate about stuff. But the reality is if we're wrong about something, it's that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, we'll admit it. We're gonna change our I'm gonna change my perspective and view on something like 30 times.
Hmm. For
Today, it
sure.
might be one way, but, Adam Grant is one of my favorite authors. He wrote a book, it's called Think Again, and the premise of the book is to leave room to be wrong. It doesn't mean you can't take a side. It doesn't mean you can't have a stance. It doesn't mean you can't have an opinion and a passion, but it does mean that you can leave room to be wrong and understand where everybody's coming from and, you know, I there's nothing wrong with that. So
Well, and I think in an industry where it's so undefined, we have to have that mindset. We can't come in with my way is the only way because
yeah,
there's always going to be an agency that's bigger, that has more revenue, that has more clientele. And they didn't get that way by not changing their mindset and changing their processes and
right,
procedures. And if that's where you're wanting to go, it's recognizing maybe not even that you're wrong, but that you need to change the way that you're operating. And I myself have had to do that so many times. I know we keep saying we're not healthcare, or we're not medical, but because there's such an overshadow of the healthcare industry and the medical industry in what we do, we're very mirrored to that philosophy and the way that that industry runs. And that industry is based on change. Everything changes all the time in healthcare. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about healthcare is that things are ever changing, things are ever evolving. I love that there's constant studies being done. Things are always changing, they're always researching. It's just one of the things that I really enjoy about the medical community. And that's one of the things we'll dive into at a later topic, but or a later time. One of the areas of passion of mine is dementia care. And with home care, everyone talks about being a dementia care provider. And there are very, very few that actually do it and do it well. And
yeah,
it's just become another easy slogan to put on their signs and say that they do.
right,
Um, but dementia is changing every single day. It changes from person to person. In order to understand the disease and how we incorporate that into home care, change has to happen. So we're
right,
going to talk a lot about change as we go through these episodes and how we've changed, our agencies have changed, how our staffing has changed, because we all know that that always happens, right? We are always changing staff. Um,
yeah,
and coming out
never
of COVID,
ending.
never ending. Coming out of COVID, we know that industry standards have changed over the last 3 years. There's a
Yeah,
lot of things that have changed coming out of the COVID pandemic. It's left us all, I think, with a little PTSD, a little
yeah,
trauma. I think some of us are still. I have days where I'm still operating in trauma mode.
yeah, especially
Um,
right now with the numbers are a little higher than they have been,
yeah, our numbers are pretty
kind
high
of
in
like
Michigan right
whiplash.
now. Hmm.
I know,
Yep.
I know. So,
Fun
Yeah,
times.
yeah, it is fun. It is fun. So, um, but yeah, good times ahead for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of fun topics to talk about.
Thanks for joining us on Home Care Hot Seats with Kelly and Nicole. We hope today's session has given you insight, inspiration, and a sense of community in this ever-evolving journey of home care ownership. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and share it with other fellow home care agents and professionals.
Have a topic you want us to discuss or a story to share? Reach out to us and join the conversation. You'll find the links and contact info you need in the show notes below. We'll see you next time, same place. Bye for now.
Bye.